Hi, Amy, it's Professor Lepore. Since we didn't get a chance to have your writers meeting this week, I thought that I would give you feedback online. I hope you're feeling better when we come back from Thanksgiving. So remember, this is just like our in-person writers meetings. And what we're going to do is we're going to take your draft. We're going to compare it against the rubric. I'm going to make some comments on the things that I'm seeing. And I'm going to make some recommendations of things that you might want to put into your revisions plan. So why don't we start with sources? We talk about it all the time in the class, that sources are really, really important. No matter how well you write, no matter how clear your thoughts are, if it's built on a shaky foundation, we both know that the writing itself can never, ever meet its potential. So let's start with the sources. So looking at them, you use 7 sources. 3 of them are supposed to be studies. You've done that. And every source that you're using appears to be related to your project, and they're all from appropriate publications. This is great. Sources are so important, and you're off to a strong start. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at content, or what you pulled out from these sources. So you have a lot of information in your paper. You have an appropriate amount of information for the length of the paper and the kind of paper that we're doing. And you cite your sources throughout. You use detail on your studies too. There's a couple places where I'd like you to see add just a little bit more detail into describing the studies. You'll see that on your paper when I drop it through Blackboard for you. Just because then your audience will understand how the researchers came to their conclusions and how you, as the writer of this literature review, have come to your conclusions. It just makes it easier for your reader to understand how all this is unfolded. So now let's end with talking about the writing style itself. You've clearly organized and sectioned off your paper. You start off with an introduction. You have your 3 body areas, and you have your conclusion. So this is great. You're following the academic writing format and the models that we've used in class. Okay. Your spelling and your grammar is clear enough that your reader should know what you're saying. So overall, on that level, you're doing well. Now, there are a couple things that I'd like you to put into your revisions plan for your next draft, which is due after Thanksgiving. So the first thing I'd like you to take a look is your formatting. Formatting in APA throughout the entire paper. Remember how a title page should look. Go back to the models, go back to OWL, go back to the material on Blackboard, and take a good look at how your cover sheet should look. Remember, it should have your name on it. It should have your affiliation on it. All that kind of information. I want you to walk through, compare it, and make a revisions plan. Throughout the paper, you're using APA citation, last name, comma, year if you're working with articles, which is great. But you do deviate a couple times in terms of your formatting. Be careful if you're going to be doing callouts where you're going to start with the author's name. Take a look at APA. Do you need to use the first and last name? You might want to look back into that and be sure. Don't use a word, don't use one of your word spaces if you can avoid it. Finally, looking towards the end of the paper, in your references page, I want you to go back to the models, go back to the materials, and do a comparison. There are some formatting issues in here. If you're not able to find them, remember you can always contact the Writing Center or come in during office hours, and I can help you one-on-one. The last thing, in my last couple minutes before I have to stop this, I want to dig a little bit deeper into something in the writing. In your opening, you're mentioning 3 big ideas: passion, commitment, and intimacy. But in the paper itself, I'm not seeing that. I see that you actually mark them out as passion, commitment, and optimism. And, optimism is probably very important, especially reading about the source that you talked about. So you might want to go back and revise that introduction. Sorry about blanking out there for a minute. Somebody walked in my office. Okay, let me start that again. So in the last minute or 2 that we have, I just want to dig a little bit deeper into the paper and the writing. So again, I mentioned that in the opening, You mentioned 3 big ideas: passion, commitment, and intimacy. But in the body, the sections that you have, you changed them out, and one of them is now optimism. You might want to go back to that introduction and revise it to include optimism so your reader isn't surprised when it shows up. So there's another thing that I'd like you to do, okay, is that as you read through this paper and you prepare your final draft, I want you to think about the fact that we're processing and producing a synthesis of the readings that you've done. The goal is to provide a research-based overview of the topic. Remember, not an argument, not persuasion. Okay? Compare this writing to the ones that you've written in composition. See, in an essay, we want to hear you address some of it, not always. Remember how Professor Sisler feels about that. But some of it, you want to make sure that you're working from the strength of your information and not from passion or engagement with your audience. So the goal here is to synthesize and store specific knowledge that you gain through your readings, but not to persuade, not to convince. Considering a paper from this point of view, you might want to look for conversational starts where you address the audience. Things like put your loved one's needs before your own and do not be selfish. Look through, too, for places where you make sweeping statements like, well, these people are wrong. Okay? At the close of the paper, use your literature carefully to wrap up what your readings have told you. Be careful not to deviate onto another point. If you take a look at that closing, you suddenly bring in a whole nother piece of information. Is it a good study? I'm sure it looks like it. But did you really want to throw that curveball to your audience when you should be wrapping up everything in a nice little bow? Be careful in your final revision that you don't deviate onto extra points, that you stick with the things that you've already identified, and that you don't follow back into rhetorical writing styles. So this is a really good first draft. Take a look at the paper, which I'm going to upload to Blackboard, and this conversation. And before Thanksgiving break, please take a moment to make your revisions list and put that up on Blackboard. As always, if you need me, you can grab me through email or stop in during the office when you're back on campus. Thanks. Bye.